All right. So we're going to continue today. That looks pretty good. We're going to continue today with our discussion of intervals. We've been talking about the intervals of the major scale, which are what qualities? Major and perfect. So we've been working with those qualities. And we know major intervals we find where in the major, using the major key signatures. At what numbers? Major intervals will be 2, 3, 6, and 7, right? And perfect intervals will be which intervals? 1, 4, 5, and 8. Again, we always have to keep track of that. So we just have to keep that in mind all the time that major intervals are 2, 3, 6, and 7. And perfect intervals are 1, 4, 5, and 8. Now we're going to go on to the other qualities of intervals today, but in order to find them, we always are going to start with the major or perfect interval. Okay? So this is the way it works. A major interval, a half step larger, becomes augmented. Now remember how I said this, because in a couple weeks I'm going to say it again, and I'm going to tell you that I told you this. I'm going to remind you, okay? I'm telling you that a major interval, or an augmented interval, is a half step larger than a major interval. So here's a major interval, right? So remember, an interval is the distance between two notes. Here's a major interval. An augmented interval will be a half step larger. So if I raise the top note, it's a half step larger, right? The distance between my hands. But let me just show you one other thing. How would I do it if I changed it from the bottom note? I'd lower it.
That would still be augmented.
It'd be a half step larger, wouldn't it? So what we're talking about, an augmented interval is a half step larger than a major. I can either raise the top note or lower the bottom note. But since we're working from the bottom note, we are going to mostly, for a while, raise the top note. So an augmented interval, and by the way, this arrow up right now means larger. Remember that. The arrow in this case, that equals larger, and the arrow down equals smaller. So if I want to find an augmented interval, I would find the major and just make it a half step larger. Or if I was using 1, 4, 5, or 8, I would find the perfect interval, and I would also, to find the augmented interval, make the perfect interval a half step larger. So in this case, they're the same. Major or perfect. The differences come when I'm making the interval smaller. So if I make a major interval a half step smaller, 2, 3, 6, or 7, those will become minor intervals. So if I found a major interval, for example, and I made it a half step smaller with, say if the top note was natural, I would lower it with a flat. That would make it a half step smaller. And that would become a minor interval. A perfect interval, a half step smaller, 1, 4, 5, or 8, becomes diminished. So this is the difference. That's why you have to really keep track of this. Are you dealing with 2, 3, 6, or 7 major intervals in major keys, or 1, 4, 5, and 8 perfect intervals in major keys? Because you can see you get different answers here. Now if I make a minor interval a half step smaller, I also get a diminished. Or I could look at it from this point of view. I could say a major interval a whole step smaller becomes diminished. So this is how we get the other qualities of intervals. They start with the major and perfect. We can then make the interval larger and get the augmented interval in both the major and perfect. If we make the major interval a half step smaller, we get a minor interval. If we get a major interval a whole step smaller, we make it a diminished interval. If we start with a perfect interval, 1, 4, 5, or 8, and make it a half step smaller, we have a diminished interval. All right, let me show you how that works. Can I erase this? Does everybody have that? You should have written it. I hope you wrote this down. All right, I'm going to erase this. All right. So let's say your question is you're given this note and you're to write an interval a minor third above it. So the way we start, we do it exactly the same way. And I'm going to give you certain steps to follow, and I'm going to recommend that you do not skip any of the steps. Okay, because when you start skipping steps, that's usually when students start to get the wrong answers. Yes?
How do you know that's major or minor third? Oh, it's capital or lower.
Yes, I'm using, so how do I know it's a major or minor third? So for me, notice when I make a major, when I mean major, I'm using a very angular M.
Okay.
When I use minor, I actually put 3 humps on it, right? It's pretty easy to tell.
Okay.
And that's a good point, because if I can't tell the difference on your paper, I'll probably be marking a lot of your answers wrong. So make
3 humps too, you won't-
absolutely.
Okay.
Please make 3 humps. Please make 3 curvy humps from minor and smaller, and 2 big angular humps on major. I love it. And the other thing is, when you're writing diminished, make sure to use a lowercase d, and when you're writing augmented, please use an uppercase A. Right? 3 humps mean minor. All right, so back to this question. So these are the steps. So the first thing you're going to do, just like we were doing, you find the third. You forget if it's major, perfect, minor, doesn't matter. But we know thirds are what? Major, perfect. Major. Right? Which one? I didn't mean yes or no. Which one? Thirds are major, yes. So we're looking for the major third to start with, so we're just going to do that first. So what's the third above F? A. And I can say, all right, the key signature of F is 1 flat. So that means A is natural in that key. So now I have a major third. But I want a minor third. I need to make it a half step smaller. So I'm going to make the distance a little closer. How would I do it with the top note? Yes, Emily.
You would raise or lower the A half step.
Right, that would make it a half step smaller, wouldn't it? So what accidental would be A flat? Correct. So it goes back to this little chart that I gave you. Again, normally we don't write natural signs unless we're canceling out a sharp or flat. But if we start with a natural note and we want to raise it a half step, we'll use a sharp. If we're starting with a sharp, we want to raise it a half step, we'll use a double sharp. If we're starting with a natural, we want to lower it a half step, we'll use a flat. If we're starting with a flat and we want to lower it a half step, we'll use a double flat. So it goes back to this chart. So we're at the natural. To make it a half step smaller, we went to the flat. All right, let's do another one. Actually, let's do a few out of the book. So I'm looking at page 141 right now, and I'm going to start with this one. Looking for a minor second from D. So the first thing I want you to think right now, are seconds major or perfect? In the major scale, seconds are major. So we're going to find the major second first. So what's the second above D? E. The key signature of D is 2 sharps. Tells us E is natural. So D to E is natural. I need to make it a half step smaller, so the answer will be E flat. So I'll just put a flat sign right there. The minor second then is D to E flat. Good. All right. Now here's where you really have to pay attention to what interval you're starting with. Are fifths major perfect in the major interval? Pardon me, in the major scale. Fifths are perfect. Good. So we're going to start with the perfect fifth. So what's a fifth above G? D. And the key signature of G is, when sharp, tells us D is natural. So G to D is a perfect fifth. Now, remember what I said. If you're starting with a major interval and you go a half step smaller, you get a minor interval. Major interval, a half step larger, you get augmented. Perfect interval, a half step larger, you get an augmented interval. A perfect interval, a half step smaller, you get a diminished interval. And then this last one here, a minor interval, half step smaller, becomes a diminished interval. So right now we're at the perfect. So to make it diminished, we only need to go a half step, right? That's why we really needed to know that, didn't we? Because if we thought that was a major interval, we would have to go a whole step smaller to make it diminished. So that's why we really have to be clear here. Is the interval perfect or major in the major scale to start with? So fifths are perfect. We're going to make it diminished, so the answer will be D flat. Voila. Beautiful. D flat. All right, let's go to the augmented octave from E flat. All right, so I know the perfect octave from E flat is what? This is pretty easy, right? The perfect octaves are perfect. The perfect octave from E flat is what? E flat. I need to make it a half step larger, so what will the answer be? E natural. So you're going to, here's a case where I probably would like you to use the natural sign, just to be clear about that. Yes?
How can you tell me to make it larger and smaller?
Okay, it's here. It's right here. What we were talking about, Sylvester. This is how I know if I'm starting with a perfect interval. I'm either going to start with a major or perfect interval. That's what I want you to find, because that's what we've been practicing for the last couple of days, right? We've been practicing learning how to find the major and perfect intervals. So once you find that, in this case, we know an octave is perfect, correct? I mean, to start with. Octaves, they're going to be one or the other, either perfect or major interval. We know octaves are perfect in the major scale. We're going to make that interval a half step larger to make it augmented, because that's what we were looking for, was an augmented interval. You follow me on that? So a few steps here, but nothing really too problematic as long as you stay with the steps. As you just stay with each step, I don't think you'll have any problem. Okay, now we're looking for a diminished fifth from A. So again, the first thing I want you to know is fifths are perfect. And then we're going to work it just like we did the perfect fifth. A fifth above A is E. Key signature of A is 3 sharps. Tells us E is natural. Perfect fifth is A to E. I'm going to turn that to a diminished fifth by making it what? A half step smaller. It's going to be E flat. Beautiful. All right, let's go to the augmented fifth at the end of this first row. So we're looking for an augmented fifth from F. Again, fifths are, don't skip a step, fifths are perfect. A fifth above F is C. We know the key signature of F is 1 flat. Tells us C is natural perfect fifth. We want to make it augmented, so that's going to be, Sylvester, what's that going to be? C sharp. It's going to be a half step larger. Beautiful. And see, what we're doing when we raise that top note is we're actually turning it from a perfect fifth to an augmented fifth, because we're actually making that interval a half step larger. Do you see the distance between my hands? Here's the perfect fifth. I raise the top note. You see it's farther apart, right? So those notes are farther apart. I'm just trying to give you a visual on that. And sometimes you might even do that for yourself. I know people think I look funny doing that, but I'd rather look funny and get the right answer. Right? Make sense? Okay. Let's do a couple in the next row. Let's do diminished sixth from E flat. Okay, diminished sixth from E flat. All right, so again, First step is 6 are major. So we're going to find the major 6. What's the 6th above E? C. Key signature of the bottom note, E flat is 3 flats. Tells us C is natural. So beautiful. Now I have a major 6, E flat to C. But we want to make it diminished, and we're at the major. So how much do I need to lower that note to make it diminished? So I'll have to make it a whole step smaller, and I'll lower the top note by a whole step with a double flat. Beautiful. E flat to C double flat is the diminished 6th. Good. All right, let's do a couple more. Augmented second. Seconds are major. A second above D is E. So we're working above the note now. So we want to go to E. Key signature of D. 2 sharps tells us E is natural. D to E then is the major second. So now we're at the major interval. We need to make it augmented. So the answer will be E sharp. We'll raise that note a half step. D to E sharp is the augmented second. Good. All right, let's go to the next one. We're doing is it an augmented fifth? Yes, an augmented fifth from E flat. We know fifths are perfect. A fifth above E flat is B. Key signature of E flat tells us B is what? Flat. So the perfect fifth, everybody, will be E flat to B flat. But I'm looking for an augmented fifth. So here I am at the perfect with B flat. To make it augmented, what will it be? B natural. So I can just put a natural sign on that. E flat to B natural.
So you want us to use natural signs when doing all
No, you don't have to. I'm just doing it right now. You don't have to do that. But on the octave, it's probably a good idea because if you were writing a piece and you wanted an augmented octave, it would be difficult for me to know as a performer. If you had E flat on the bottom and E natural on the top, I would think it might be a misprint.
Oh, okay.
You see, because they're both the same letter name.
Right.
But on this one, it probably wouldn't matter. So let me just take that off. Let's just say, hey, that's good like that, right? All right, let's do a couple more. We've got a minor second. Seconds are, what are seconds? Major, right. And so a second above A is B. Key signature of A, 3 sharps tells you B is natural. A to B is a major second. We're looking for a minor second, so what do I need? I'm going to lower that top note a half step, make the interval a half step smaller, and we have A to B flat is the minor second. Great. All right, let's do one more. We've got a diminished octave right at the last one. So we're looking for a diminished octave. Octaves are perfect. What's an octave above E? E. Same answer, right? Except I just write an octave higher. So E to E, and we know that that's perfect. Octaves will have the same accidental. So there's the perfect. So how do I make that diminished? I'm going to lower that top note a half step and make the interval a half step smaller. That gives me the diminished octave. Great. What do you think? So the key is the steps that I was using. You know, we don't skip any. When you look at the interval, you decide 1, 4, 5, and 8 are perfect, right? So if you see it's one of those, you know it starts perfect. 2, 3, 6, and 7, you know that's a major. Find the major perfect interval, and then use the accidentals to create the other qualities. And that's all you have to do. And as long as you keep this straight, which one you're working with, I don't think you'll have any problem. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, I think that's a take. All right, good.